Less than 50 miles north of the big city of Jacksonville, Florida, lay 13 miles of coastline on what is known as Amelia Island, part of the Sea Islands chain that dots the Atlantic Ocean from South Carolina to Florida. Amelia Island is the southernmost tip of the Sea Islands and takes its name from Princess Amelia Sophia Eleanor of Great Britain, the spinster daughter of 18th century King George II and Queen Caroline. Amelia Island is home to 3 prominent communities, one of which was once called the Negro Ocean Playground, historically known among African Americans as a place for recreation and relaxation without humiliation. Recreation and relaxation without humiliation. That's how the brothers and sisters marketed this vacation spot to ourselves way back in the day. A place for recreation and relaxation without humiliation. In the words of someone who has lived there since 1988, quote, American Beach is an African-American community located on Amelia Island, Florida's northernmost barrier island. The small, coveted niche is carved like an open-faced sandwich onto a half-mile bed of sand and surf along the Atlantic Ocean. The name American Beach came about in 1935. When the tract of land was purchased and developed by the Afro-American Life Insurance Company and its president, Abraham Lincoln Lewis. Born out of a need to create a resort where African Americans could enjoy and have unrestricted access to the Florida coastline, American Beach became a mecca described as a Negro ocean playground. End quote. Those are the words of Marsha Dean Phelts, who, among other things, is the author of the American Beach Cookbook, which was published in 2008 by the University Press of Florida. Ms. Phelts made a career in her hometown for many years as a distinguished librarian in the Florida Genealogy Department of the Jacksonville Public Library. In the American Beach Cookbook, Ms. Phelts has recorded the culinary heritage of Florida's first Black-owned and Black-populated coastal resort area, with a collection of over 300 recipes passed down through the generations, all created in the kitchens of American Beach residents, carried to the sand and shoreline, and enjoyed on countless weekend getaways, summer vacations, and oceanside cookouts. Now, born in Washington, D.C., and raised in Prince George's County, Maryland, never have I ever heard of combining shrimp with potato salad. But that is exactly what's going down on page 103 of the American Beach Cookbook. Ms. Marsha Dean Phelts writes, while I was growing up, white or Irish potatoes were known as ice potatoes. Now, I have no idea why they were called ice potatoes. I can only suppose that it was because as they were peeled and diced for potato salad, they were dropped in a bowl of ice water to prevent them from discoloring. Beatrice Carter was an entrepreneur who operated a women's hosiery shop in Black Jacksonville's La Villa neighborhood on Davis Street, next to the Ritz Theater, now the Ritz Museum and La Villa Museum. She was known widely for her potato salad. Potato salad was as much a staple in picnic baskets as white bread, mustard, and hot sauce for a fish sandwich. Before World War II ended, Miss B's family became early investors in American Beach. They had a cottage built and brought in an Airstream trailer. Family and friends by the hundreds took turns enjoying the Carter family's hospitality. Over the years, Miss B's daughter, Francina, helped prepare beach fare for their guests. She improved upon her mother's traditional potato salad recipe by spiking the dish with succulent shrimp and sprinklings of savory spices. For years, people on the First Coast have placed orders with her for this recipe, which she now shares for the American Beach Cookbook. Southern Shrimp Potato Salad, a recipe by Francina Carter King. Peeled potatoes. Cover with salted cold water by 2 inches in a 3-quart pan and simmer uncovered until tender, not mushy, about 15 to 20 minutes. Transfer potatoes to a bowl of ice water. After potatoes have cooled, cut into cubes and place in a large bowl. Combine potatoes, green onions, hard-boiled eggs, celery seed, Old Bay seasoning, mayonnaise, seasoned salt, pepper, dill weed, and garlic powder. And mix with a large fork. Cook shrimp and crawfish, crab, and shrimp boil, according to package directions, 2 to 3 minutes. Let shrimp cool, then add to potato salad and mix. Refrigerate for a short while. On page 7 of the American Beach Cookbook, author Marsha Dean Phelts writes, "Cooking with just the right pan is as important as the ingredients. Until I began collecting recipes from my American Beach friends and neighbors for this cookbook, I naively thought that our old iron frying pan was a unique and esoteric part of my family's heritage. But once I gathered recipes, I found cook after cook listing the iron frying pan as a recipe ingredient. Recipes were coming in with instructions like 1 pound of ground beef sauteed in an iron frying pan, or coat with flour and deep fry in iron frying pan. For many entrees, an iron frying pan, a sprinkling of seasonings, and a lot of love are credited with a dish's savory outcome. Seasoned iron frying pans are almost as significant as the heirloom recipes themselves. In my family, a mere day trip to American Beach called for the reliable black iron frying pan. Laying claim to Granny's seasoned iron pot was worth falling out over in other families. Beginning cooks cannot afford to be without an iron frying pan, and experienced cooks wouldn't think of attempting culinary feats without them. The best source for acquiring a seasoned iron frying pan is to ask an experienced cook for one of her or his extras. If that fails, new iron pans continue to be inexpensive, but new ironware must be seasoned before it becomes worthy cookingware. Ain't that a life lesson? You have to become seasoned before you become worthy. Seasoning is important. On page 130 of the American Beach Cookbook, author Marsha Dean Phelts writes, "There are times when residents of American Beach feel that they have had too many shrimp. Other times, there may be too many crabs or too much fish. When it comes to too much of an item, people often become more creative and resort to different ways of cooking the same old thing. You can tell when shrimp are plentiful. House pets are fed shrimp omelets. Rose gardens flourish due to rich fertilizing with raw shrimp heads. Another sign is that dinner guests are treated to generous servings of shrimp entrees." Charles Albert, three-time mayor of Fernandina Beach, often reminisces about what he refers to as an impoverished childhood growing up and living on the Amelia River in the sparsely populated Nassauville on the west bank of the Amelia River, facing Amelia Island. After neighborhood fishermen sold their catches at the canneries on the wharf or the fish markets throughout the island, they headed home. The rumbling sounds made by the aged trucks could be heard from a distance as they made their way over the ruts. When these Nassauville fishermen pulled up to a house, the dogs barked and folks ran out front to receive their neighborly offerings. At each homestead, a wooden barrel or old claw-footed porcelain bathtub served as a permanent receptacle for the giveaway catch. Seldom did the Albert family enjoy beef or pork, for these meats either had to be bought at the market or slaughtered in season. The bountiful harvest from the sea came in every season. Thus, islanders frequently availed themselves of the ready supply of food from the sea. The Albert children's having to bring a fish or shrimp sandwich to school for lunch was most embarrassing. However, the fish, the shrimp, the crabs, or the oysters and other foods yielded by the sea or the river were staples in their diet. As children, the young Alberts had no yearning for what they considered poor folks' lunches. Charles Albert remembers having too many shrimp to cull, clean, and cook. When the Alberts tired of fried shrimp, boiled shrimp, and shrimp Creole, their mother smothered or stewed shrimp as a last resort. Smothered Shrimp, a recipe by Ernie and Charles Albert. Squeeze the lemon juice over the shrimp. In a Dutch oven or deep iron frying pan, heat the oil until hot but not smoking. Sauté the onion and bell pepper until soft, approximately 10 minutes. Set aside. Beat the egg with the water and coat each shrimp with beaten egg. Then flour. Reserve the flour. Deep fry the shrimp in a Dutch oven until golden brown. Remove the shrimp and drain on paper towels. Pour the oil from the pot, leaving enough to barely cover the bottom. Add the remaining flour to the oil in the Dutch oven and cook over medium heat, stirring to brown. When the flour has browned, add garlic, bell peppers, and onions. Slowly pour in 2 cups water and 1 cup milk or cream, increasing the heat until the gravy begins to bubble. Add Worcestershire sauce, pepper sauce, and salt and pepper to taste. On page 7, Miss Marsha Dean Phelts writes, "Rather than attending to precise measurements of ingredients, over the years, I have grown to realize that cooking is more an expression of love that flows through the heart and hands of the preparer into the bodies of those who eat the meal. The more I cook, the more I recognize the ambiguity of terms like cook until done, some flour, or a pinch. For universal purposes, measurements need to be precise, but many ordinary recipes become unique because of the loving touch of ingredients aptly applied with creative culinary senses." Lower the heat and stir in the shrimp. Let simmer for 20 minutes. Serve with white rice. In 1838, slave-owning cotton planters settled the town of Madison, Florida, and their emerging plantations were dependent on the free labor of thousands of enslaved African Americans. Julia Brown and Robert Lewis were two such captives. However, on March 29, 1865, their son, Abraham Lincoln Lewis, was born free in Madison County, Florida, and named after the president who issued the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863, which declared that all persons held as slaves within the rebellious states are and henceforward shall be free. Today, in Four Freedoms Park in downtown Madison, this memorial, which remembers the multitude of former slaves who once upon a time labored on the plantations of Madison County, Florida. This obelisk was erected in 1996 with money raised by local citizens. Like many formerly enslaved African Americans, the Lewis family eventually migrated from the land of their captivity and headed for greener pastures in a more urban area. For the Lewis family, that meant settling on the east side, also known as the neighborhood of East Jacksonville along the St. Johns River, eventually settling into this house at 903 Jesse Street. This is how the house looked in 1994 before it was demolished 1 year later. A very young Abraham Lincoln Lewis left the Oakland Graded School and took a job at the Dexter Hunter Sawmill, which had a reputation for offering work to black men who were previously enslaved. Mr. Lewis worked there for 22 years, first as a water boy, then as a laborer and mechanic, eventually becoming a foreman and reportedly the highest paid black man at the mill. Now think about that, brothers and sisters. 22 years on the job doing manual labor as what we would now call a blue-collar worker before all the things that eventually made this man famous as a white-collar businessman, property developer, and philanthropist. That's a life lesson right there. Days of preparation are never wasted days, no matter where you are right now or what you are doing right now, so long as you follow your vision and are spiritually on purpose, you are being prepared for something greater. At age 19, Mr. Abraham Lincoln Lewis got married, and at age 23, he became a partner in a black-owned shoe store. In 1901, along with 6 other black men, Mr. Lewis, in his mid-30s, founded the Afro-American Industrial and Benefit Association, which was the forerunner of the Afro-American Life Insurance Company. Mr. Abraham Lincoln Lewis became the president and board chair of the newly named company in 1919. Not long after that, in the early 1920s, with his business firmly established and very profitable, Mr. Lewis set his eyes upon the real estate market and began investing in properties. In 1928, at the age of 63, Mr. Abraham Lincoln Lewis organized and became president of the 50/50 Bottling Company, the first black-owned and operated company of its kind, selling soda water through multiple factories in the state of Florida. When the Wall Street crash of 1929 spiraled the nation into a decade of the Great Depression, marked by massive job losses, plunging people into poverty, decreased corporate and farm profits, and the loss of many homes and businesses, Abraham Lincoln Lewis and the Afro-American Life Insurance Company took advantage of foreclosures and began buying up the land that would one day be developed into American Beach. Coconut fried shrimp, a recipe by Marsha Dean Phelts, on page 133 of the American Beach Cookbook. In a 1-quart mixing bowl, combine 1/2 cups flour, The milk. Baking powder. Curry powder. And salt to make a batter. Place the remaining half-cup flour and the coconut in separate, shallow pans. Dredge the shrimp in flour. Dip in batter and then roll in coconut. Fry in hot oil at 350 degrees until coconut is golden brown. Drain on paper towels before transferring to a warming tray. More than a decade before the American Beach Cookbook, author Marsha Dean Phelts wrote An American Beach for African Americans, also published by the University Press of Florida. The work is hailed as the most detailed study done to date on Abraham Lincoln Lewis and the history of American Beach.
I didn't know A.L. Lewis. He died in 47 and I was born in 44. But A.L. Lewis was it. He was the equivalent of when you go to school, you study about George Washington Carver. Well, he was a George Washington Carver. He was a Frederick Douglass. And though I did not know him, I'm here today because of how he laid this beach out. If he had, like, this is A.L. Lewis's beach, this is my beach, I will sell you this and sell you that, or the insurance company owned this beach, we wouldn't be here today because the beach was sold. Whatever pieces they had, A.L. Lewis's great-grandson, James, sold 100 acres of the property, and it's now not in the American Beach tract. And if the Afro had owned the whole 200 acres, we would not be here today. But Lewis was the kind who, couldn't enjoy a steak by himself. He could not enjoy a recreation facility. He had property at Jacksonville Beach, but he couldn't do that by himself. And he was the kind who was a race man. That's what we call people like that, who did well and looked out for their brothers and sisters and wanted them to do well too. So though he didn't go any further than 6th grade, he was a teacher, and he taught his employees and his friends and his church members how to invest, how to have something, and he just shared with people. And then on top of that, when you talk about that era, the 30s and the 40s, 50s, you couldn't go up to no Barnett Bank or Bank of America or Chase Bank and go up there and say, I want to build me a house. I want to buy me a car. That didn't happen for us. But with the Afro and Lewis's investment needed a mortgage, you needed a loan, you needed a car, sign up. Not everybody could get it, but you certainly had more people becoming homeowners and owning cars because of his investment and his smartness. He was a hero, and his name is alive today with us.
On page 35, author Marsha Dean Phelts writes, "Far more than an entrepreneur, Lewis has been credited as the leading force behind several historic building projects still standing in Jacksonville, including Mount Olive AME, the Lewis Family Mausoleum, and the 5-story reinforced concrete and brick Masonic Temple. The roots of the Masonic Brotherhood run deep into the dust tracks of African American history and experience." In his book, The Secret Teachings of All Ages, Manly P. Hall writes, "The sanctum sanctorum of Freemasonry is ornamented with the Gnostic jewels of 1,000 ages. Its rituals ring with the divinely inspired words of seers and sages. 100 religions have brought their gifts of wisdom to its altar. Arts and sciences, unnumbered, have contributed to its symbolism. Freemasonry is a worldwide university, teaching the liberal arts and sciences of the soul to all who will hearken to its words. Its chairs are seats of learning, and its pillars uphold an arch of universal education. Its trestle boards are inscribed with the eternal verities of all ages, and upon those who comprehend its sacred depths has dawned the realization that within the Freemasonic mysteries lie hidden the long-lost arcana sought by all peoples since the genesis of human reason. The philosophic power of Freemasonry lies in its symbols, its priceless heritage from the mystery schools of antiquity." Completed in 1916, the Masonic Temple has served as the focal point for Jacksonville's Black community's commercial and fraternal activities for decades, anchoring La Villa's Broad Street. So writes urban planner Ennis Davis. Then valued at $102,000, the mixed-use building featured retail at street level, office space on the second and third floors, with the top floors being occupied by the Grand Lodge. Described as one of the finest buildings in the world, owned by the Black community. Throughout Jacksonville's history, the Masonic Temple was instrumental in the development of the local Black middle-class community, civil rights, and the Chitlin Circuit. Still owned and operated by the most worshipful Union Grand Lodge, most ancient and honorable fraternity, free and accepted Masons, Prince Hall affiliation, Florida and Belize, Central America Jurisdiction Incorporated, the building was designated to the National Register of Historic Places in 1980. In his book, The Lost Keys of Freemasonry, Manly P. Hall writes about the Master Mason. On the upper steps of spiritual unfoldment stands the Master Mason, who spiritually represents the graduate from the School of Esoteric Learning. In the ancient symbols, he is represented as an old man leaning upon a staff, his long white beard upon his chest, and his deep, piercing eyes sheltered by the brows of a philosopher. He is, in truth, old, not in years, but in wisdom and understanding, which are the only true measurement of age. Through years and lives of labor, he has found the staff of life and truth upon which he leans. He no longer depends upon the words of others, but upon the still voice that speaks from the heart of his own being. There is no more glorious position that a man may hold than that of a master builder who has risen by labor through the degrees of human consciousness. In this picture, Manly P. Hall writes, is concealed the allegory of the lost word. The master mason, having completed his labors, becomes a worker on a higher plane than the one in which the ordinary builder is permitted to work. The master mason becomes the capstone of the universal temple. Dearly and well-beloved brethren of the African Lodge, as through the goodness and mercy of God, we are once more met together in order to celebrate the festival of John the Baptist, it is requisite that we should, on these public days, and when we appear in form, give some reason as a foundation for our so doing. I shall at this time endeavor to raise part of the superstructure, for howsoever good the foundation may be, yet without this it will only prove a babel. I shall therefore endeavor to shew the duty of a mason, and the first thing is that he believes in one supreme being, that he is the great architect of this visible world, and that he governs all things here below by his almighty power, and his watchful eye is over all our works. The next thing is love and benevolence to all the whole family of mankind as God's make and creation. Therefore we ought to love them all, for love or hatred is of the whole kind. For if I love a man for the sake of the image of God which is on him, I must love all, for he made all and upholds all, and we are dependent upon him for all we do enjoy and expect to enjoy in this world and that which is to come. Therefore he will help and assist all his fellow men in distress, let them be of what color or nation they may, yea, even our very enemies. Much more a brother mason. Another thing a mason ought to observe is that he should lend his helping hand to a brother in distress and relieve him. This we may do various ways, for we may sometimes help him to a cup of water, and it may be better to him than a cup of wine. Good advice may be sometimes better than feeding his body, helping him to some lawful employment better than giving him money, so defending his case and standing by him when wrongfully accused may be better than clothing him. Better to save a brother's house when on fire than to give him one. Thus much may suffice. If thus we, by the grace of God, live up to this our profession, we may cheerfully go the rounds of the compass of this life, having lived according to the plumb line of righteousness, the square of justice, the level of truth and sincerity. And when we are come to the end of time, we may then bid farewell to that delightful sun and moon and the other planets that move so beautifully round her in their orbits, and all things here below, and ascend to that new Jerusalem where we shall not want these tapers, for God is the light thereof, where the wicked cease from troubling, and where the weary are at rest. Those are the words of Prince Hall as delivered on June 25th, 1792. Mr. Prince Hall is the father and founder of what is now called the most worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge, Free and Accepted Masons, jurisdiction of Massachusetts. The current Grand Master of that lodge says this: "Our legacy started on March 6th, 1775. When Prince Hall and 14 men of color were made Masons in Lodge number 441 of the Irish Registry attached to the 38th British Foot Infantry at Castle William Island in Boston Harbor. It marked the first time that men of color were made Masons in America. When the British Army left Boston in 1776, Lodge number 441 granted Prince Hall and his brethren authority to meet as African Lodge number 1 under dispensation. Finally, on March 2nd, 1784, Prince Hall petitioned the Grand Lodge of England through a worshipful master of a subordinate lodge in London, William Moody of Brotherly Love Lodge number 55, for a warrant or charter. It was granted on September 29th, 1784. Captain Scott, brother-in-law of John Hancock, delivered the warrant to Prince Hall personally on April 29th, 1787. Prince Hall died on December 4th, 1807, and his remains are interred at Copp's Hill Cemetery in Boston, Massachusetts. In 1847, out of respect for their founding father and first Grand Master, they changed their name to Prince Hall Grand Lodge, the name it carries today. 245 plus years later, Prince Hall's legacy as a Freemason, a founding father, a leader, and first Black Grand Master has survived. There are now over 4,500 lodges worldwide, forming over 47 sovereign jurisdictions, with a membership of over 300,000 Masons who can trace their origins to African Lodge 459, Boston, Massachusetts. On page 155 of his book, American Beach, A Saga of Race, Wealth, and Memory, author Russ Rymer writes, "Throughout the building of the Afro-American Life Insurance Company, A.L. Lewis had enjoyed the good offices of various powerful whites, notably Attorney John C. LaIngle and William Barnett, the president of Barnett Bank, the state's largest. They were from Jacksonville's Brahmin families, of such brass-bound genealogy and secure station that they could afford to ignore the cracker impulse to fortify their well-being with another man's misfortune, and so were friends to blacks, though generally behind the scenes. At crucial moments in the history of the fledgling Afro, they did for it what they also did for white companies of similar youth and promise. They threw their professional muscle and institutional worth into guaranteeing a loan or warning off a corporate bully. When A.L. Lewis decided to build a town on the coast of Amelia Island in neighboring Nassau County, he required the offices of someone local to handle transactions in land and cash. Someone who knew the courthouse blindfolded and the registrar of deeds by nickname. He settled on Jaime Fischler, one of Fernandina's foremost attorneys. Author Marsha Dean Phelts writes, on January 31st, 1935, the Pension Bureau bought the first of the 3 parcels for $2,000 from the estate of Richard Delafield, 33 acres with 1,000 feet fronting on the ocean. The parcel's boundaries can be traced today in American Beach, from Mary Street on the west to Lewis Street on the south, the ocean on the east, and Julia Street on the north. Development began immediately, with streets being cut and lots surveyed and sold. The Afro Pavilion and homes pounds went up. Now, the number 33 is a very sacred and for many a very holy number. And there are lots of spiritual principles and energies associated with the number 33. In the Christian tradition, King David ruled Jerusalem for 33 years, and Jesus was crucified on the cross and resurrected at the age of 33, symbolizing the highest spiritual consciousness attainable by a human being. Your back, B-A-C-K, your back, is made up of a series of bones called vertebrae, and together they form a flexible column. And in this spinal column, there are 33 vertebrae. In sacred science, through yoga and through meditation, the Kundalini energy is said to rise from the root chakra up the spine of these 33 vertebrae to open the crown chakra and to awaken and enlighten the spiritual seeker. The Bible refers to this same process as climbing Jacob's ladder. The ancient Hebrew Kabbalistic tree of life contains 33 permutations of consciousness and is often depicted with a serpent coiling up and around the tree, showing the path to take to Kether or to Kether, K-E-T-H-E-R, the crown chakra. In the secret society of the Freemasons, there are 33 degrees of initiation, and the number 33 is the highest obtainable degree within Masonry. The number of turns in a complete sequence of double helix human DNA equals 33. The Afro bought the adjoining second parcel, 100 acres, from Olin and Cornelia Watts in 1937. Based on the number of documents required for this transaction, the Pension Bureau apparently first needed a white agent to buy the property and then sell it to the Afro. Olin Watts, a white lawyer whose firm represented Lewis and the Afro for many years, served that purpose. The tract today begins at A1A, the First Coast Highway, on the west and runs between Burney Road and Lewis Street to Ocean Boulevard on the east. The third parcel of land, 83 acres with a 1,500-foot shoreline, was granted to the Pension Bureau of the Afro by the U.S. government in 1946 during the presidency of Harry S. Truman. American Beach was now a community of 216 contiguous acres with a half-mile ocean front. The first streets built in American Beach were named after 4 of the Afro's 7 founders. The very first, the main thoroughfare and the only street allowing vehicular beach access, was Lewis Street, named for the Afro chairman of the board. All but 2 of the other streets intersect with Lewis. Both Julia Street and Burney Road run east-west parallel to Lewis Street. Gregg, the first street parallel to the ocean, honors the Reverend Elias J. Gregg, pastor of the Mount Zion AME Church and the first president of the Afro-American Industrial and Benefit Association when it was chartered in 1901. Inland from Gregg lies Ocean Boulevard, a road that ran through dunes and offered a commanding view of the Atlantic. The third street from the ocean, and that with the highest elevation, was named for J. Milton Waldron, the influential pastor of Jacksonville's Bethel Baptist Institutional Church from 1892 until 1907, upon whose idea the Afro was built. To Waldron Street's west lies Price, named for the Reverend Alfred W. Price, the third president of the Afro-American Life Insurance Company. As president, Price established a savings bank During the 1870s and early 1880s, Price, a retail grocer, had also served as a deputy sheriff, later as a Duval County constable. His grandson, Albert W. Price III, and Zora Neale Hurston were married in the Nassau County Courthouse in 1939. Author Russ Rymer writes, "Of the 11 streets that cross or parallel Lewis Street, several, Walden Street, Price Street, Lee Street, and Gregg Street, bear the surnames of men who huddled with A.L. Lewis in a church study in Jacksonville in 1901 to plan the formation of the burial society that became the Afro, as the company is known to its familiars. Several more, such as Irvin Street, after the Afro's first sales agent, and Birney Road, after one of its last presidents, are named for those who labored under Lewis to keep the enterprise going. The other streets are Kent. Julia Street is named after A.L. Lewis's mother. James Street is named after James H. Lewis, A.L. Lewis's son, whose beach house still stands next to that of the patriarch, and who succeeded him as president of the Afro and held that office into his senescence, retiring in 1967. 3 blocks after James Street comes Leonard Street, honoring J. Leonard Lewis, who was James H. Lewis's son and became the Afro's legal counsel after graduation from New York University Law School. James L. Lewis, the heralded heir to the Afro succession, would soon fall into debt and disrepute. He was arrested for running drugs in a shrimp boat that bore his name. The patronymic that had served as a beacon of respectability for generations of Jacksonville blacks now graced the police blotter of the DEA. He would die in 1992 of a heart attack. During his presidency, the Afro-American Life Insurance Company began a precipitous slide toward bankruptcy, dissolution, and in 1987, receivership by the state. American Beach also began its final slide into neglect. Sunday afternoons at the beach were different, where hundreds and hundreds of visitors from everywhere found the intersection of Lewis and Gregg Streets and the big parking lot an exciting place to be. There you would find people wearing bathing suit fashions of all kinds, automobiles of all kinds, alcohol and food aromas of all kinds, and people just having a partying good time. Located at the dead end of Lewis Street and nearby were popular places and restaurants. These businesses originated and accommodated the visitors. There was a place near the beach walkover called Sweet Tooth, where great smelling cotton candy was sold. There was El Patio for food, dancing, soft drinks, beer, and a photo booth. There was Reynolds Sandwich Shop next door to El Patio. Williams Guest Lodge was located at the north end of Gregg Street. My late husband and I would go there often, where we could reminisce and get a tasty seafood dinner with waitress-style service, personally served by the owners we knew so well. Duck's Ocean View Inn on Lewis Street, between Irvin and James Streets, was much like Williams Guest Lodge, where you could take your special friends to a delicious sit-down dinner. I remember going there with people like the president of Florida A&M University, Dr. and Mrs. George W. Gore, and eating there with my mother and other guests. Dr. Gore was my undergraduate alma mater president, who was, at that time, vacationing at the famous A.L. Lewis Motel on Gregg Street. Evans Rendezvous, sometimes called the liquor store, was known for mouth-watering barbecue and seafood, drinks, beer, liquor, and a patio out back facing the ocean. The Rendezvous was quite a place where social clubs and other groups often scheduled special events during other days of the week, excluding Sundays. On Sunday afternoons, there would be so many people, you had to edge your way to get through the sit-down and stand-up crowds. Then there was Dad and Chicks down the street, south of the Rendezvous, known for good food, soft drinks, and beer. We also claimed the Honey Dripper out on A1A. The beach was not the beach without the Honey Dripper, because this establishment had a bar and sold liquor just like the Rendezvous. Back in those times, it was a big thing if you were a black business and could own a liquor license. Also, no one looked at you funny for being at the Honey Dripper for good food, fun, and listening to the jukebox, blasting away the popular oldies of the 50s and 60s. Even those old sanctimonious folks would be popping in and out. Crowds that were not already at the Honey Dripper headed there when it got dark at the entertainment area around Lewis and Gregg Streets. Those were the good old days, and this was our land. We were shut out of the white world by Jim Crow laws, but we were at home and felt safe and protected in our own world. From the book, The Shrinking Sands of an African American Beach, published in 2006 by Annette McCollough Myers. On page 144 of the American Beach Cookbook, author Marsha Dean Phelts writes, Annette McCollough Myers, former president of the American Beach Property Owners Association, has been the owner of the historic Miss Martha's Hideaway on American Beach since 1960. Annette was born on Amelia Island and comes from a seafaring family, community, and town. She states that seafood was their livelihood. Her father, Wendell McCullough, owned his shrimp boat. Annette united with another seafaring family when she married Elmo Myers of nearby St. Mary's, Georgia. Elmo was the captain of his own ship and sailed far and near following shrimp. Early on, Annette experienced the preparation and eating of a wide variety of seafood. She has cooked a varied range of seafood and enjoys the delicate taste of squid. When it comes to eel, she draws the line. She's had many opportunities to try her hand at eating or preparing eel, but never had a desire to work with this snake-like fish. When asked for her favorite recipe, Annette fondly remembered this one she created for her husband's shrimp boat crew. Though she hasn't prepared this recipe in years, she recalls that it was a hit with the locals and that they served it during the cold, wintry months or in drumfish season. Annette describes drumfish season as when gnats are biting. Gnats are a nuisance during the summer months, and that's when large drumfish bite as well. Nowadays, Annette favors serving a seafood creole using shrimp with a combination of fish, crabs, scallops, squid, or whatever else the catch of the day is. Seafood Creole, a recipe by Annette McCollough Myers. Heat the oil in a saucepan until hot but not smoking. Saute the bell pepper, onion, celery, and garlic until tender. Add tomato paste, water, and seasonings. Simmer 15 minutes, stirring occasionally. Add seafood and heat through. Serve over hot seasoned brown rice or other rice of your choice.